What's this feeling? I don't like it. Make it go away as soon as possible. Sound familiar? That's me doing a universal impression of how most humans respond to distress. I don't like it. I don't want it. Do whatever you can to make it go away. But I think we can all agree that it isn't working. In fact, the avoidance tactic is less effective now than it was 3, 5, or 10 plus years ago. So let's try something different. Hey everyone, how's it going? I'm Kira Wackett. Thanks for joining me for another video as we work to empower and equip you with the confidence and skills to write your own story so that you can live your life on purpose. Today, we're gonna walk through a step-by-step process to better understand what your distress looks like and feels like, and how we can better respond to it in a personalized and empathetic way. Distress is an extreme or intense presence of pain, anxiety, or sorrow. It can be used to describe a physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual experience, such as pain after surgery or difficulty breathing with a cold, intense grief or sadness that can make it difficult to complete daily activities, or anxiety that's causing you to lose sleep or exist in a state of hypervigilance and rumination. We all feel it. You probably feel it right now as I talk about distress. Just knowing we're going to address it can kick up our anxiety. And when it shows itself, it triggers this whole cascade of symptoms. Your chest gets tight, your heart rate increases, and your breathing gets shallow. You notice tension in your body. You get hot, maybe your mind starts to race or go blank. You feel keyed up, vigilant. You begin to feel your throat swell and a sensation of panic run through you. That's distress. A complete change in the mind and body to respond to whatever threat is in front of you, real or perceived. It's uncomfortable and, in many cases, a very normal and necessary part of the human experience. I would hope I would feel distressed when I just got in a bike accident or narrowly avoided getting hit by a car while driving. I absolutely want my body's response system to kick in when I'm walking in the dark and I hear a loud sound moving closer to me, or when I'm in a painful or uncomfortable conversation with someone that feels tense and conflict-ridden. The issue isn't that we feel it, it's the intensity, frequency, and effect on our lives. The experience is no longer appropriate or proportional to the overall human experience. So what can we do? First, we need to answer the question, why? Why do we feel distress? What role does it play? Distress is a signal to indicate your body is experiencing stress and needs attention. It's activated by a stressor, single or compounding, which brings up an important side note and a point of distinction in our work and focus. Often we get lost in an attempt to control stressors, minimizing, avoiding, etc. This makes sense as stressors are the inputs that activate the body's stress and distress cycle, which it seems proactive, upstream. And it works, sometimes. There are absolutely some stressors we can control, but radical acceptance, stressors are inevitable and infinite. Trying to address or prevent them all is like going into a game of whack-a-mole with no mallet and the machine popping out moles double time. Being angry, sad, or resentful at the demands of your job or the perpetual workload increases, the news, Aunt Julie or your neighbor Todd for their raging stance against your political ideology and unwavering ability to remind you of it, or the fear that's always lurking around the corner at what nastiness your toddler is bringing home from school. Yes, that last one is one I'm still working on. We do nothing by focusing on these things other than burn ourselves out. My only choice is to change how I respond, and thus it's the reason we're here today. Okay, so returning to your regularly scheduled program and thinking about that why and the role of distress. You can see why distress can be helpful. It's a signal, but how did it get so intense and why is it so consuming? Well, the issues lie in the fact that, one, most of us have low emotional intelligence and processing skills, making our ability and comfort to name our emotions low, let alone move through them. Two, we're human givers, deeply conditioned in our shame to be fine at all costs to keep up with the demands of hustle culture and be seen as worthy and valuable. Three, We have an unhealthy relationship with control, exacerbated by that drive to be fine, which leads us to focus on trying to control or avoid stressors rather than learn to move through and prepare for them. And 4, we exist in a world and time where stressors are compounding at a rate higher than we can earnestly address them. Now, even what I'm saying here, we can see that some of this is out of our control. We can't control what we've been taught and how we've been socialized to view and respond to our emotions. We can't control the patriarchal system in which we live, wherein power and dominance have created and continue to deepen ladder systems that lead many of us to see our value in what we do and how we give ourselves to others and the world. And we sure as can be have no control over 97.6% of the stressors that come our way, whether it be the presence of a global pandemic, inflation, the voting and political choices of our loved ones, whether or not someone says thank you when you hold the door open, or if your boss actively works to respect and enforce boundaries in your office. But we can control the channels of input through which we receive stress, which is a fancy way of saying we can set boundaries with others and ourselves. We can control the work we put into learning and deepening our emotional intelligence. We can control whether or not we seek Band-Aid solutions or truly address and treat the wounds and pain endured. We can learn to differentiate between good and bad distress and walk through the good so we can let go of those shame-driven stories we've so deeply clung to about needing to be and do it all for everyone else at all cost. And we can learn to radically accept what's not in our control. So how do we do that? In the show notes, you'll find a link to a handout I made that walks us through understanding and responding to our distress. Before you continue on with the video, go ahead and pause here and snag that worksheet. Then let's walk through it together. The first step is already done. Just by learning about and considering the role of distress in our lives and beginning to differentiate between helpful and unhelpful distress, you're already starting to tease apart this tangled system. Second, we need to understand our own experience of distress better. What does your distress look like to you? What does it mean? Can you break down your distress into its fragments? Are you anxious, afraid, sad, depressed? What is it? Are there combinations of emotions you most commonly experience? Are there different presentations your distress has? In your worksheet, you'll explore the idea of your distress and clarify what emotions make it up. From here, we'll rank your distress to create a scale of pain and suffering specific to you. Why? Because distress is subjective and relative to a person's experiences, environment, and biology. To do this, we'll have you break down your distress on a scale from 0 to 10 and define the mental, emotional, and physical effects and how you respond or how you act and engage in interpersonal relationships at each of the intervals. So next to each value or interval, we'll put down stressors that activate that level of stress or distress you. To do this, I'll ask you to consider different roles, relationships, pain points, and specifically your goals. What do we know will and has caused you stress in this video, in your life in the past week? What will cause you distress as you continue to move forward? Let's think today, tomorrow, a week from now. And what effect will it have when it does if we don't alter or change course? This step of scaling and specifying how you experience distress is crucial, as what may be a 5 for me in terms of pain might only be a 1 for you. Or something that activates you at an 8 or a 9 may only be a 3 or a 4 for me. Getting clear on what has, is, and will cause you distress helps give you a greater sense of self-compassion and how to respond in the future. Once we've completed this part of the process, we'll begin the discovery phase by looking at what helps when we get to that level of distress, and subsequently, what doesn't. So for example, when I'm experiencing distress, which in my case is about 90% fear and anxiety and 10% anger, at a 3 or a 4, cold water, a short walk, or talking it out with someone is really helpful. When I reach a level 7 or above, those things are increasingly less effective. Instead, I often need to cry, yell, which I healthily and effectively do by singing really, really loud, or go to the basement and work out. Any workout with super bass heavy hip hop will usually work, but specifically I like doing intense hip hop dance workouts. Often the crying ends up happening simultaneously with the dance, so I get kind of both of those mixed in. In fact, it's the way that I most effectively have dealt with the waves of grief after my grandma died or hard moments with my kid as she emerges in those toddler tantrums. For some of these intervals, you may already know what does or doesn't help, and it's equally important to note things that don't work as well as those that do. But this is often a time when trial and error is key. There's a link in the show notes for my self-care guide, which offers over 20 different response tools you can try to help address or manage distress. Maybe progressive muscle relaxation worked for you at a 6, but it doesn't at a 10. Maybe journaling works at a 3, 4, or 5, but loses its efficacy as you get above that. Be sure to try various supports and tools to address distress, including the ones you find yourself resistant to. And finally, the last section is our radical acceptance and preemptive response planning section. So here, you're going to look at the different stressors that trigger these different responses and explore some common yet often forgotten stressors while considering what is and isn't in our control, what we have to accept or let go of, and how we can set boundaries and change the way we show up in our lives to limit these stressors whenever possible. Now, this is a living document, which means as you learn more about what does or doesn't cause you distress, cultivate new skills, or take on different roles in relationships in your life, it's important to update this sheet. I also recommend sharing it with close relationships or people in your life, at least the section on support tools, so that they can know what is and isn't helpful for you when you feel stressed. Remember, getting lost in a sea of comparisons and self-judgment is easy. We scale our pain and stress against others and ascribe value judgments based on who is or isn't allowed to feel distressed based on how their circumstances measure up. Let that go. Your distress scale is yours alone. Focus on making sense of how your body experiences stress, when, why, and how, and what it's looking for from us to move through and past it. Before you go, leave us a note in the comments with any questions or ideas you have to keep the conversation going and the learning collaborative. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to some other resources on identifying and managing distress and anxiety and the practice of self-care. And if you haven't joined the AR Insider yet, be sure to click the link in the show notes and get yourself on that list to get exclusive content and discounts that I don't share anywhere else and stay in the know on all of the happenings of Adversity Rising. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to give me that thumbs up and share this video with someone else who needs to hear it. And of course, hit that subscribe button and you'll get an alert every time there's new content that is coming your way instead of having to come back here and search for it. Thank you so much for being here with me today. Remember, you have the right to author your own story. So let's go get that pen back together.